Prologue, 1975. The morning express bloated with passengers slowed to a crawl, then lurched forward. Suddenly, as though to resume full speed. The train's brief deception jolted its riders. The bulge of humans hanging out of the doorway distended perilously, like a soap bubble at its limit. Inside the compartment, Manic Cola held onto the overhead railing, propped up securely within the crush. He felt someone's elbow knock his textbooks from his hand. In the seats nearby, a thin young fellow was catapulted into the arms of the man opposite him. Manic's textbooks fell upon them. "Ow," said the young fellow, as volume 1 slammed into his back. Laughing, he and his uncle untangled themselves. Ishvar Darji, who had a disfigured left cheek, helped his nephew out of his lap and back onto the seat. "Everything all right, OM." "Apart from the dent in my back, everything is all right," said Om Prakash Darji, picking up the 2 books covered in brown paper. He hefted them in his slender hands, and looked around to find who had dropped them. Manic acknowledged ownership. The thought of his heavy textbooks thumping that frail spine made him shudder. He remembered the sparrow he had killed with a stone, years ago. Afterwards, it had made him sick. His apology was frantic. "Very sorry, the book slipped and..." "Not to worry," said Ishvar. "Wasn't your fault." To his nephew he added, "Good thing it didn't happen in reverse, Han. If I fell in your lap, my weight would crack your bones." They laughed again, Manic too, to supplement his apology. Ishvar Darji was not a stout man. It was the contrast with Om Prakash's skinny limbs that gave rise to their little jokes about his size. The wisecracks originated sometimes with one and sometimes the other. When they had their evening meal, Ishvar would be sure to spoon out a larger portion onto his nephew's enamel plate. At a roadside dhaba, he would wait till Om Prakash went for water, or to the latrine, then swiftly scoop some of his own food onto the other leaf. If Om Prakash protested, Ishvar would say, "What will they think in our village when we return? That I starved my nephew in the city and ate all the food myself. Eat, eat. Only way to save my honor is by fattening you." "Don't worry," Om Prakash would tease back. "If your honor weighs even half as much as you, that will be ample." Om Prakash's physique, however, defied his uncle's efforts and stayed matchstick thin. Their fortunes, too, stubbornly retained a lean and hungry aspect, and a triumphal return to the village remained a distant dream. The southbound express slowed again. With a pneumatic hiss, the bogies clanked to a halt. The train was between stations. Its air brakes continued to exhale wheezily for a few moments before dying out. Om Prakash looked through the window to determine where they had stopped. Rough shacks stood beyond the railroad fence, alongside a ditch running with raw sewage. Children were playing a game with sticks and stones. An excited puppy danced around them, trying to join in. Nearby, a shirtless man was milking a cow. They could have been anywhere. The acrid smell of a dung fire drifted towards the train. Just ahead, a crowd had gathered near the level crossing. A few men jumped off the train and began walking down the tracks. "Hope we reach in time," said Om Prakash. "If someone gets there before us, we've finished for sure." Manic Cola asked if they had far to go. Ishvar named the station. "Oh, that's the same one I want," said Manic, fingering his sparse mustache. Hoping to spot a watch dial, Ishvar looked up into a thicket of wrists growing ceiling-ward. "Time, please," he asked someone over his shoulder. The man shot his cuff stylishly and revealed his watch, 9:15. "Come on, Yar, move," said Om Prakash, slapping the seat between his thighs. "Not as obedient as the bullocks in our village, is it?" said his uncle, and Manic laughed. Ishvar added it was true ever since he was a child, their village had never lost a bullock cart race when there were competitions on festival days. "Give the train a dose of opium, and it will run like the bullocks," said Om Prakash. A comb seller, twanging the plastic teeth of a large comb, pushed his way through the crowded compartment. People grumbled and snarled at him, resenting the bothersome presence. "Oi," said Om Prakash to get his attention. "Plastic hairband, unbreakable, plastic hair clip, flower shape, butterfly shape, colorful comb, unbreakable." The comb seller recited in a half-hearted monotone, uncertain whether this was a real customer, or just a joker passing the time. "Big comb and small comb, pink, orange, maroon, green, blue, yellow comb, unbreakable." Om Prakash gave them a test run through his hair before selecting a red specimen, pocket-sized. He dug into his trousers and extracted a coin. The comb seller suffered hostile elbows and shoulders while searching for change. He used his shirt sleeve to wipe hair oil off the rejected combs, then returned them to his satchel, keeping in his hand the big dual-toothed one to resume his soft twanging through the compartment. "What happened to the yellow comb you had?" asked Ishvar. "Broke in two." "How?" "It was in my back pocket. I sat on it." "That's the wrong place for a comb. It's meant for your head, OM, not your bottom." He always called his nephew OM, using Om Prakash only when he was upset with him. "If it was your bottom, the comb would have smashed into 100 pieces," returned his nephew, and Ishvar laughed. His disfigured left cheek was no hindrance, standing firm like a mooring around which his smiles could safely ripple. He chucked Om Prakash under the chin. Most of the time their ages 46 and 17 were a misleading indicator of their actual relationship. "Smile, OM. Your angry mouth does not suit your hero hairstyle." He winked at Manic to include him in the fun. "With a puff like that, lots of girls will be after you. But don't worry, OM, I'll select a nice wife for you. A woman big and strong, with flesh enough for two." Om Prakash grinned and administered a flourish to his hair with the new comb. The train still showed no sign of moving. The men who had wandered outside came back with news that yet another body had been found by the tracks, near the level crossing. Manik edged towards the door to listen. A nice, quick way to go, he thought, as long as the train had struck the person squarely. Maybe it has to do with the emergency, said someone. What emergency? Prime Minister made a speech on the radio early this morning. Something about country being threatened from inside. Sounds like one more government tamasha. Why does everybody have to choose the railway tracks only for dying? Grumbled another. No consideration for people like us. Murder, suicide, Naxalite terrorist killing, police custody death, everything ends up delaying the trains. What is wrong with poison or tall buildings or knives? The long-anticipated rumble at last rippled through the compartments, and the train shivered down its long steel spine. Relief lit the passengers' faces. As the compartments trundled past the level crossing, everyone craned to see the cause of their delay. 3 uniformed policemen stood by the hastily covered corpse awaiting its journey to the morgue. Some passengers touched their foreheads or put their hands together and murmured, "Ram, ram." Manik Kola descended behind the uncle and nephew, and they exited the platform together. "Excuse me," he said, taking a letter from his pocket. "I am new in the city, can you tell me how to get to this address?" "You are asking the wrong people," said Ishvar without reading it. "We are also new here." But Om Prakash glanced at the letter and said, "Look, it's the same name." Ishvar pulled a square of ragged paper out of his own pocket and compared it. His nephew was right, there it was, Dinadalai, followed by the address. Om Prakash regarded Manik with sudden hostility. "Why are you going to Dinadalai? Are you a tailor?" "Me, tailor?" "No, she is my mother's friend." Ishvar tapped his nephew's shoulder. "See, simply you were panicking. Come on, let's find the building." Manik did not understand what they meant till Ishvar explained outside the station. "You see, OM and I are tailors. Dinadalai has work for 2 tailors. We are going to apply. And you thought I was running there to steal your job." Manik smiled. "Don't worry, I am just a student. Dinadalai and my mother used to be in school together. She's letting me stay with her for a few months, that's all." They asked upon Walla for directions, and walked down the street that was pointed out. Om Prakash was still a little suspicious. "If you are staying with her for a few months, where is your trunk, your belongings?" "Only 2 books you have." "Today, I'm just going to meet her. I will shift my things from the college. Hostel next month." They passed a beggar slumped upon a small wooden platform fitted with casters, which raised him 4 inches off the ground. His fingers and thumbs were missing, and his legs were amputated almost to the buttocks. "Oh babu, ek paisa de re," he sang, shaking a tin can between his bandaged palms. "Oh babu. Hi babu. Ari babu, ek paisa de re." "That's one of the worst I've seen since coming to the city," said Ishvar, and the others agreed. Om Prakash paused to drop a coin in the tin. They crossed the road, asking again for directions. "I've been living in this city for 2 months, said Manik, "but it's so huge and confusing. I can recognize only some big streets. The little lanes all look the same. We have been here 6 months and still have the same problem. In the beginning we were completely lost. The first time, we couldn't even get on a train. 2 or 3 went by before we learned how to push." Manik said he hated it here, and could not wait to return to his home in the mountains, next year, when he finished college. "We have also come for a short time only," said Ishvar. "To earn some money, then go back to our village. What is the use of such a big city? Noise and crowds, no place to live, water scarce, garbage everywhere. Terrible. Our village is far from here," said Om Prakash. "Takes a whole day by train morning till night to reach it." "And reach it, we will," said Ishvar. "Nothing is as fine as one's native place." "My home is in the north," said Manik. "Takes a day and night plus another day to get there. From the window of our house you can see snow-covered mountain peaks. A river runs near our village," said Ishvar. "You can see it shining, and hear it sing. It's a beautiful place." They walked quietly for a while, occupied with home thoughts. Om Prakash broke the silence by pointing out a watermelon sherbet stand. "Wouldn't that be nice, on such a hot day?" The vendor stirred his ladle in the tub, tinkling chunks of ice afloat in a sea of dark red. "Let's have some," said Manik. "It looks delicious." "Not for us," said Ishvar quickly. "We had a big breakfast this morning," and Om Prakash erased the longing from his face. "Okay," said Manik doubtfully, ordering 1 large glass. He studied the tailors who stood with eyes averted, not looking at the tempting tub or his frosted glass. He saw their tired faces, how poor their clothes were, the worn-out chap pals. He drank half and said, "I'm full." "You want it?" They shook their heads. "It will go to waste." "Okay, yar, in that case," said Om Prakash and took the sherbet. He gulped some, then passed it to his uncle. Ishvar drained the glass and returned it to the vendor. "That was so tasty," he said, beaming with pleasure. "It was very kind of you to share it with us, we really enjoyed it, thank you." His nephew gave him a disapproving look to tone it down. How much gratitude for a little sherbet, thought Manik, how starved they seemed for ordinary kindness. The veranda door had a brass nameplate, Mr. and Mrs. Rustam K. Dalai, the letters enriched by years of verdigris. Dina Dalai answered their ring and accepted the scrap of crumpled paper, recognizing her own handwriting. "You are tailors?" "Hanji," said Ishvar, nodding vigorously. All 3 entered the veranda at her invitation and stood awkwardly. The veranda, which used to be an open gallery, had been converted into an extra room. When Dina Dalai's late husband was still a child, his parents had decided it would be a playroom to supplement the tiny flat. The portico was bricked and fitted with an iron-grilled window. But I need only 2 tailors, said Dina Dalai. Excuse me, I'm not a tailor. My name is Manik Kola. He stepped forward from behind Ishvar and Om Prakash. Oh, you are Manik. Welcome. Sorry, I couldn't recognize you. It's been years since I last saw your mummy, and you I have never, ever seen. She left the tailors on the veranda and took him inside, into the front room. Can you wait here for a few minutes while I deal with those 2? Sure. Manik took in the shabby furnishings around him, the battered sofa, too. Chairs with fraying seats, a scratched teapoy, a dining table with a cracked and faded Rexine tablecloth. She mustn't live here, he decided. This was probably a family business, a boarding house. The walls were badly in need of paint. He played with the discolored plaster blotches, the way he did with clouds, imagining animals and landscapes. Dog shaking hands. Hawk diving sharply. Man with walking stick climbing mountain. On the veranda, Dina Dalai ran a hand over her black hair, as yet uninvaded by grey, and turned her attention to the tailors. At 42, her forehead was still smooth, and 16 years spent fending for herself had not hardened the looks which, a long time ago, used to make her brother's friends vie to impress her. She asked for names and tailoring experience. The tailors claimed to know everything about women's clothes. We can even take measurements straight from the customer's body and make any fashion you like, said Ishvar confidently, doing all the talking while Om Prakash nodded away. For this job, there will be no customers to measure, she explained. The sewing will be straight from paper patterns. Each week you have to make 2 dozen, 3 dozen, whatever the company wants, in the same style. Child's play, said Ishvar. But we'll do it. What about you? She addressed Om Prakash, whose look was disdainful. You have not said a word. My nephew speaks only when he disagrees, said Ishvar. His silence is a good sign. She liked Ishvar's face, the type that put people at ease and encouraged conversation. But there was the other tight-lipped fellow, who frightened away the words. His chin was too small for his features, though when he smiled everything seemed in proportion. She stated the terms of employment. They would have to bring their own sewing machines, all sewing would be piecework. The more dresses you make, the more you earn, she said, and Ishvar agreed that that was fair. Rates would be fixed according to the complexity of each pattern. The hours were from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., less than that would not do, though they were welcome to work longer. And there would be no smoking or pan-chewing on the job. Pan we don't chew only, said Ishvar. But sometimes we like to smoke a bidi. You will have to smoke it outside. The conditions were acceptable. What is the address of your shop? Asked Ishvar. Where do we bring the sewing machines? Right here. When you come next week, I will show you where to put them, in the back room. Okay G, thank you, we will definitely come on Monday. They waved to Manik as they left. We will see you again soon, Han. Sure, said Manik, waving back. Noticing Dina Dalai's silent inquiry, he explained about their meeting on the train. You must be careful who you talk to, she said. Never know what kind of crooks you might run into. This is not your little hamlet in the mountains. They seemed very nice. Yes, she said, reserving judgment. Then she apologized again for assuming he was a tailor. I could not see you properly because you were standing behind them, my eyes are weak. How silly of me, she thought, mistaking this lovely boy for a bow-legged tailor. And so sturdy too. Must be the famous mountain air they talk about, the healthy food and water. She peered a little closer, tilting her head to one side. It has been over 20 years, but I can recognize your mummy in your face. You know Abin and I were in school together. Yes, he said, uncomfortable under her intense scrutiny. Mummy told me in her letter. She also wanted to let you know I'll move in from next month, and she'll mail you the rent check. Yes, that's all right, she said, dismissing his concern about the details and drifting again into the past. Real little terrors we used to be in our school days. And a third girl, Zenobia. When we 3 were together, it was trouble. With a capital T, the teachers would say. The memory brought a wistful smile to her face. Anyway, let me show you my house and your room. You live here as well. Where else? As she led him through the dingy little flat, she asked what he was taking at college. Refrigeration and air conditioning. I hope you will do something about this hot weather then, make my home more comfortable. He smiled feebly, saddened by the place in which she resided. Not much better than the college hostel, he thought. And yet, he was looking forward to it. Anything would do, after what had happened there. He shuddered and tried to think of something else. This one will be your room. It's very nice. Thank you, Mrs. Dalai. There was a cupboard in one corner with a scratched, misshapen suitcase on top. A small desk stood beside the cupboard. Here, as in the front room, the ceiling was dark and flaking, the walls discolored, missing chunks of plaster in several places. Other stark patches, recently cemented, stood out like freshly healed wounds. 2 single beds lay at right angles along the walls. He wondered if she would sleep in the same room. I will move one bed into the other room for myself. He looked through the door beyond and glimpsed a room tinier, and in worse condition, crowded by a cupboard also with a suitcase on top, a rickety table, 2 chairs, and 3 rusting trunks stacked on a trestle. I am turning you out of your own room, mumbled Manik, the surroundings depressing him rapidly. Don't be silly. Her tone was brisk. I wanted a paying guest and it is my great good luck to get a nice Parsi boy, the son of my school friend. It's very kind of you, Mrs. Dalai. And that's another thing. You must call me Dina auntie. Manik nodded. You can bring your things here any time. If you are not happy with the hostel, this room is ready, we don't have to wait for a special date next month. No, it's all right, but thank you, Mrs. On, careful. I mean, Dina auntie. They smiled. When Manik left her flat, she began pacing the room, suddenly restless, as though about to embark on a long voyage. No need now to visit her brother and beg for next month's rent. She took a deep breath. Once again, her fragile independence was preserved. Tomorrow she would bring home the first batch of sewing from Au Revoir exports.